Welcome back to our tutorial on building and using a corporate sponsorship sales system. This is episode 3, and I'm Rick Jones, captain of FishBait Marketing and a managing director of engagement. We're still on step number 1, which is the foundation of everything. It is that equal triangle of what's good for the property has to be also good for the sponsor and has to also be good for the fan. So today we're going to start talking about everything you need to know about a potential sponsor or a prospect. In episode 2, we talked about what fans want and what the property wants. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what the sponsor wants. Now, the sponsor marketing process is absolutely the same for every single company or brand, and there are 5 steps. Step number 1. Identify the target audience. Who does the sponsor want to talk to? Number 2, what do they want to say? What are the objectives they have for the sponsor, for their constituent? Number 3, select the mediums. Where do they want to say it? Number 4, determine the timing. When do they want to say it? And finally, step number 5 is the how, the tactics, and that's really the art part of it. Let's break it down. Let's start with the target audience. With no apologies to Dr. Seuss, but we need to identify the who's who. When you look at the audience, you begin to look at things like what generation do they come from? What kind of demographical information do you need to know about them? What type of psychographical information do you need? And in doing those 3 things, you need to be really specific. You need to begin to identify certain consumer personas, right, where you begin to tell stories about consumers and how they relate to the brands that you're trying to attract. At the same time, not every sponsorship is about consumers. Sometimes it's about secondary targets, like maybe retailers or shareholders or investors or the government or even your own people, your associates. And we'll get into that in quite a bit of detail. Wow, we currently have 5 generations that are in the marketplace right now, and they're very, very different. Now, I could spend probably 4 or 5 hours on this one topic alone. So let's just kind of skim the surface and talk about the 5 generations that are in the marketplace. The first one are what we call the mature generation. These were born before 1945. This group is the 75 and older group. This is a group that listens very, very well because they grew up listening to the radio. This is a group that in many cases brands don't want to reach anymore. I do have a client, the Grand Ole Opry, and we have a major sponsor in Humana. And Humana sponsors the Opry for one of their products, which is their Medicare supplement insurance product. Obviously, the Grand Ole Opry Live reaches a lot of older people. This group, 74, 75 or older, and Humana wants to market to them. Second group are baby boomers. That's my generation. I sit right in the middle of that generation, born between 1946 and 1964. Their ages 56 to 74. Until this recent crash in the stock market, this group controlled about 85% of all the disposable income in America. It was great wealth. Now, what's interesting is how this group is going to react coming out of the coronavirus, because many of us that are at retirement age are now saying we're not going to be able to retire. And so we're going to stay in the game for even longer, which will have a trickle-down effect for other generations. Baby boomers grew up with television, and so they're a group that sees and perceives information by what they see. This is also a generation that seeks information. They believe that really life is kind of black and white, and if we get enough information, that we'll be able to make good decisions. The problem in today's news environment, the news is no longer the news. The news is entertainment. They're trying to attract a crowd of viewers, gross rating points, and so we don't know who to believe. Everything is politicized today. Everything is spun. Everything comes from some sort of an opinion. And so that's difficult for baby boomers to get their arms around stuff today. Third group in the marketplace is Gen X. They were named that generation because somebody wrote a book called Generation X. This is the smallest group in population. They were born between 1965 and 1976. Their age is 44 to 55. This is a generation that grew up on cable television. They also went through, at an early age, a lot of crisis. Oil embargoes, divorce, runaway inflation, economic issues that made a link to them, an indelible link on how they do things. This is a generation that likes to get referrals from their friends. You know, this is the group of the Seinfeld generation or of Friends, the television show. And what were both of those shows really about? Well, they were about the family you choose. In this case, you chose your friends and you were influenced by your friends. The largest group is the fourth group in the marketplace right now, which are the millennials. Born between 1977 and 1995, their age is 25 to 43. And they have huge economic clout. This is an enormous group. This is a group that's got a lot of debt. They have a lot of student loan debt. They have not had the kind of upwardly mobile opportunities in our economy because people like me are staying in there and they're not replacing jobs. But this is a group that candidly is the future of our country and of our world. And finally, they're the zebras or the Gen Zers. They were born between 1995 and today. This is the group under 25. I work in college sports. This is all the college sports athletes. And so we've got 5 different generations in the marketplace, and they're all so terribly different. And so one size no longer fits all. You've got to be in a position to market to them in increasingly different ways. All right, forget about generations. Let's talk about demographics and psychographics. How about ethnicity? You know, are you Hispanic? Are you African American? Are you Asian? Are you Caucasian? What about your sex? What about your sexual orientation? How about your political affiliation? Or maybe how much education you have or don't have? How about where you live, the place that you live? How about your interest? And finally, how about your religion, your beliefs, your values, your feelings? All these things go into what makes you you. And so we've got to be able to look at that as marketers and determine the target audience and what their demographics and psychographics are. Now, I'm a big believer in what we call riches in niches. At FishBait, we work in college sports, in country music, in food competitions, and in outdoor sports like hunting and fishing. We seek basically the same audience. We're about 3 things. We're about what we call heartland states. You might call them red states or flyover states. We reach those consumers in their tribes, go dogs, and we reach them by enhancing their lifestyles as they participate with the activities that they love. And so we're seeking sponsors that want to reach this specific audience. And I would challenge you to look at any of your properties and determine what your best sponsors are because you reach the constituents that those sponsors want to reach. Again, sponsors, we have to determine their who's. We have to define their customers. We have to understand their customers. We have to understand their customers' customers. And in many cases, we have to understand their customers' consumers. Let me give you an example. Coca-Cola Classic, the famous Coca-Cola product. Who is the target consumer for Coke Classic today? Well, it's probably a 10-year-old boy. But 10-year-old boys usually don't buy Cokes. Moms buy Cokes. And so mom is going to buy that Coke either in a QSR or in a grocery retailer for her 10-year-old. And she's going to buy that through a retailer like a Kroger. And Kroger's going to buy Coca-Cola from a bottler. And that bottler is going to buy Coca-Cola syrup from Coca-Cola. So you see the levels of complexity that we have in doing this. So you have to determine your who's. Secondly, you've got your who's. Now, what do you want to say to them? What are your objectives? What do you want to say to your target audience? Number one, it better be relevant. Whatever you're saying has to be relevant to that particular audience and their generation, demographics, psychographics. It may be that you want brand awareness. There's new products that come out every year and they need brand awareness. You need to make that audience aware of your products. But for so many products, they don't need brand awareness. People know Coca-Cola and Nike. They know, Olive Garden. They know Bank of America. They know Visa. And so brand awareness is not important. Brand preference is important. They may want access to an audience, and they may want feedback mechanisms from that audience to have a dialogue with that audience. That's what social media can allow brands to do. They may have a new product or a new service that they're launching, and they use an event as a way to launch that product. They may be repositioning or positioning their product. Let me give you an example in the pizza category. If I say Little Caesars Pizza, what do you think of? Well, you usually think cheap. It's cheap pizza. It's pretty good. It'll fill you up, but it's cheap. If I say Domino's, what do you think? You say delivery. It's pretty fast. And if they mess up, they'll replace it with a better pizza. Now, who's struggling in the pizza category right now? Papa John's and Pizza Hut, because they really don't have a positioning that's unique to their product. Pizza Hut delivers, but they also have dine-in. For years, Papa John's would say better ingredients, better pizza, but it wasn't. And so where's your positioning and how you're going to do that? The next thing is you might want to sample your product or have somebody try your product at one of these, at one of your events. And then there's loyalty. You want to reach a crowd that will be loyal. I'm loyal to two brands. I'm a longtime flyer with Delta Airlines. I have over almost 4 million miles. I'm a flying colonel. I have a lifetime membership in the Sky Club. It's going to be hard to get me to switch to another airline because they've got me. I'm at the diamond level. I get so many perks. I get upgraded a lot. It's something that's going to be difficult because I'm loyal because they built loyalty programs aimed at me. Now, you're not going to go get a new baby boomer to become loyal to you because they're not going to build up enough points over the years. So Delta's got to go after young executives and try to get them to be like me later in their career. I'm also loyal to Hilton. And recently I got a thing where I'm now a lifetime diamond with Hilton, meaning I get all kinds of things for the rest of my life. And so I'll continue to remain loyal to Hilton and their various chains. Then there's advocacy. If you're a charity or a cause, clearly you're looking for advocates, those who will support your cause and will communicate to others to support your cause. And finally, you want exclusivity. If you're going to have an event, you want your brand to be the only competitive brand there. I remember when Visa first got involved with the Olympic Games, they had a clause in their contract that the Olympics would not take American Express. They wanted you to know that when you came to the Olympic Games, the only credit card you were going to be able to use was your Visa card. That's important. Then you got to look at the channels of distribution. Again, we talked about the Coke example, but in some cases, brands sell directly to consumers. We're home. We're grounded. How many of you have been ordering food from HelloFresh or Blue Apron? How many of you have been ordering a pizza that's been delivered? How many of you have been ordering things on Amazon Prime that have been coming to your house? These are brands that sell directly to consumers. Or you may be selling via retailers like grocery chains or others. What we've seen the retailers do now is they've had to become direct-to-consumer deliverers. And so a grocery store like Publix may say, hey, call in your order and we'll deliver it to your front porch today so you don't have to come in to our store and maybe be exposed to the virus. In many cases, products are sold through dealers or reps, and you've got to influence those dealers and reps in order to have a successful promotion. And finally, many are done by brokers. So many food companies are done by big food companies like U.S. Foods that sell to various channels of distribution. So, who do you want to talk to? What do you want to say? And now it comes to where do you want to say it? And this is where you begin to select what events, and with those events, what assets you're going to select that will help you meet your business objectives. And those are based on, obviously, the effective delivery of that target audience and being able to communicate the messages that you want to that audience. Here's what I know. Wherever you do it, it needs to be customized, it needs to be integrated, and it needs to be themed. We mentioned in episode 2 that you no longer sell assets, you sell services to fans and value to fans. And so you've got to convince a corporate partner that we're going to sell services to their customers in a way that they're going to get credit for that. Whatever you do, it's got to be timely. And we're going to talk about time in just a minute. It's got to be relevant to the audience. You've got to have ownership or ownable elements, exclusivity or exclusive elements in the property. And finally, it's got to be appropriately priced in order to get the value that you want. So when? Well, how about a day part? How about some clients look for promoting products in certain day parts or seasonality? Timing is very, very crucial. I know this. Chick-fil-A got involved with ESPN in college football to largely grow an anemic breakfast business. At that time, Chick-fil-A had a monster lunch business, a pretty decent dinner business, and a non-existent breakfast business. They used all of ESPN's college football assets to grow their breakfast business, and it's become a gazillion-dollar business. And they largely aimed at men who were leaving in the morning to go to the office and would swing by Chick-fil-A to get a biscuit and a cup of coffee. And it worked extremely well. Let me tell you one that didn't work. Right idea, wrong execution. Several years ago, we did research and found that the months of June and July are the two slowest months of the year for the pizza delivery business. In many cases, kids are at home in the summer and parents are cooking or grilling out and doing things, and they're not ordering as many pizzas. Well, we found that the month of June was a great time to sell pizzas at summer camps, at sports camps at universities. Because if you've ever worked or been at a sports camp, you know, you eat breakfast, lunch, then you eat dinner around 5 o'clock, and then you play 5 more hours of basketball, and it's now 10:30, and you're starving again. So pizza became the fourth meal that you had. And we felt like we could go and send all of these camps around the country to sell Papa John's pizzas and order those, and it would give a big lift. The problem was we ran into all kinds of conflicts on college campuses between food service providers and official pizza chains or the athletic department. Ultimately, it was a great idea. It just didn't work. If you sell anything to a CPG company, a consumer packaged goods company, you've got to understand the timing of them being able to roll out a promotion in a retailer. And that's usually 13 to 14 months after you have sold it in. And so right now, you're not going to sell anything in 2020 to a company in that area that will come alive in a retail store. So you're looking at 2021 and in many cases even 2022. The last piece is the best piece. It's the most fun piece. It's the how piece. How do you do this? This is the art in everything that we do. We used to say ROI was return on investment. Not anymore. Return on investment's been replaced by return on ideas. Where's your big idea? Here's what I know about consumers. We view brands and products horizontally and integrated. We don't live in verticals. And most corporations still live in verticals. R&D doesn't talk to research, doesn't talk to advertising, who doesn't talk to PR, who doesn't talk to marketing, who doesn't talk to sales. Well, consumers don't see the world that way. We see the world in its totality. We see brands holistically. And so you've got to have horizontal and integrated programs. You've got to bring unique and customized solutions. We're going to talk a little bit later about swim lanes. How can you begin to theme things in a swim lane that gives value to various sponsors? I also am big on personalizing assets. I've told people for years that what I do is I sell what we call the omelet station. Let's say you want to be involved in country music. Okay, country music's the eggs. Now, what do you want in your eggs? You want to be a sponsor of the Grand Ole Opry? Okay, the Grand Ole Opry's the eggs. What do you want at the Grand Ole Opry in your eggs? The omelet station. Different way to think, different way to sell. But whatever you do, it better be entertaining, and it better be experiential back to the consumer. Now, we mentioned earlier that there are other constituents beyond consumers that you may think about. Let me tell you a few stories about that. We've been talking a lot about consumer targets, but in many cases, there are other constituencies that you want to reach. Mark McCormick, the legendary founder of IMG and kind of the father of modern day sports marketing, once told a pretty interesting story. He said he met a president of a railroad company in the United States, and this railroad executive approached him about sending Jack Nicklaus over to Japan to play with this Japanese industrialist because this railroad president was trying to do business with this Japanese executive. Well, it was 1962, and Jack had never been to Japan, and Mark said, yeah, I'd like to get Jack over there. I tell you what, pay him $10,000 and pay his expenses, and he'll go over there and play golf with the guy. Well, Mark kind of forgot about it, and about 17 months later, he bumped into the same railroad executive at a cocktail party, and he said, hey, I forgot to ever get back to you. How did it go with Jack and the Japanese guy? And he goes, oh, man, it was tremendous. Came over, had a great time. It was just a wonderful experience. Mark said, well, did you ever do any business with that Japanese guy? And the guy said, yeah, $22 million. McCormick said, I should have said, pay Jack $10,000, pay his expenses, and give me 5% of whatever you sell, because he would have done it. Now, that's an audience of one. That's not cost per thousand. That's using sponsorship, using event marketing in a way to reach one single target. In many cases, you want to use event marketing to motivate and incent your employees, your associates. I had the pleasure of running UPS's Worldwide Olympic program as their agency for a number of years. And in their Latin American region, we used all of our Olympic assets in order to improve driver safety. That's right. We had more wrecks in Latin America of that big brown truck than any place else in the world. And so we incented drivers to slow down, drive more safely, and they could win Olympic merchandise and Olympic tickets. I ran, as the agency, MasterCard's 1994 World Cup program. And in that program, our target audience were not only cardholders, but were merchants. We wanted to get more merchants to accept and promote MasterCard and MasterCard cards and products during the World Cup. Tropical Smoothie Cafe is a new bowl game sponsor of the bowl game in Frisco, Texas. It's really not about fans or consumers at all. It was all about incenting and attracting more franchisees to become part of the Tropical Smoothie Cafe family. And then sometimes you're looking to do something to the community at large. American Express had a very successful sponsorship program when they renovated the Statue of Liberty. And so it was a feel-good program for all Americans that reached the community at large. Now, I know this, coming out of this coronavirus pandemic, consumers are going to want to give back, and they're going to want to support brands that give back. And so brands that support the community at large, support charities, support causes, I think are going to get ahead more than others. Now, the truth is this, I can't help a sponsor at all until I understand their who, their what, their where, their when, and their how. Now let's turn our attention back to the property. Every property is one of 3 M's. You're a message, you're a marketplace, and you're a medium. And the truth is you're usually a combination of all 3 of those. And so you have to identify in your property what messages do you have, what marketplaces do you have, and what mediums do you use. And then you will match prospects to those assets. Let me go a little deeper in that. Let's talk about the event as a message. This is every single charity out there. Your primary asset is your message. We've done some work over the years for the V Foundation for Cancer Research, the cause created by ESPN and the late Jim Valvano. The message is help us find a cure for cancer. The V Foundation doesn't do cancer education. They don't do supporting families during cancer. They take 100% of the money they raise and they put it into research grants to try to find cures for cancer. And so charities like the V Foundation and brands that support them must find and exploit brand attributes to that. In cause marketing, constituents want to know what a corporation stands for, what it believes in, and what it supports. And sponsors and consumers want to feel good about you and what you do. That's the event as a message. Then there's the event as a marketplace. The event reaches affinity groups directly for interaction with their brands and products. And this is everything you can think of in sports. Conventions, races, sporting events, museums, zoos. This is fans at the ACC tournament or on the Dollar General ESPN tailgate tour or in the College Football Hall of Fame. And this is where we determine how many people does your product or your property directly reach. And finally, the event as a medium. This is where you have a broader communication vehicle, both broadcast and narrowcast. And this is where we use traditional advertising messaging delivery systems, things like television and radio and internet and print and social and digital. Those are examples like the National Hockey League's Stanley Cup playoffs, or the Olympic Games, or the NCAA men's basketball tournament. All of these are events as mediums. But the truth is most properties are combinations of all three of these. And you just got to determine the weight. How much weight goes to each of the three M's and what percentage falls in which category. Let me give you an example in a place that we work in daily, which is college sports. The message is pretty simple. It's my school. It's loyalty. I'm loyal to my school because it's my school. The name on the front of the jersey is more important than the name on the back of the jersey. What's the marketplace? Well, it's that stadium. It's where we come on Saturdays to watch that team play. And so that 100,000 people in that stadium, that's the marketplace. And then what's the medium? Well, it's everybody that watches that game on television or listens to it on the radio or follows the team both digitally and socially. We talked a minute ago about the V Foundation. They're a combination of all three M's too. When they want to get out their message, they send me a direct mail and ask for a solicitation for the cause. But they're also a marketplace. They do a big wine celebration out in Napa every year that attracts several thousand people and raises about $4 million. That's their marketplace. But by and large, they're a medium because of their partnership with ESPN. And the biggest medium they have is V Week, the week when we ask you to donate. That's the week of the Jimmy V Classic in Madison Square Garden. And then they do it again in July when they're the benefactor from the ESPY Awards on ESPN. So the V Foundation is a message, a marketplace, and a medium. Now, I know this about every property. You got to have a reality check. You got to determine what you really are, not what you want to be. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, Rick, if I just had $1 million, I could be this. Well, yeah, I could be a lot of things if I had $1 million too, but you don't. You can't sell what you're going to be. You got to sell what you are. So what saleable, leverageable elements do you have? And then you've got to have realistic pricing for the size and scope and value. And this becomes the foundation for the rest of the 12 steps. So we've ended step 1, which leads us now to step 2, which is what we call architecture. And architecture is all about the property. We previously identified both the fan personas and the constituent personas that sponsors want to reach. But now architecture is about packaging the property. And so how do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you do an asset review. You make a list of all the assets you have, what you currently have sold and currently have to sell. Let me give you an example. In a stadium, let's say you're in a college stadium. Well, what do you have to sell in a college stadium? Well, you've got a scoreboard that can have messaging on it. You have signs, could be static or digital electronic signs in the stadium. You could sell gates, the entrance gates to a sponsor. You could sell skybox areas. You could sell areas for students versus alumni. And so you begin to make a list of all the kinds of things that you can do. Then you start thinking about, what could I create that the marketplace is asking me for that I currently don't have? Let's go back to that stadium example. Purdue University, one of our clients at Engagement, a couple of years ago, they took out seats in one of their end zones and put in a sports bar, a flat surface where people didn't sit in seats, but could go get beers and could wander around in the end zone, visit with people, and, oh, by the way, watch the game when they wanted to. So they created a new asset that they didn't have before. Whatever you do, I'm big on theming. What can we create and package in a way that tells a story with saleable assets? And so that leads me back to what I talked before about themes or swim lanes. Swim lanes are really nothing more but nothing less than themes that you begin to tell a story about a brand in that particular swim lane with brand attributes. And so what I like to do is identify assets for each swim lane. And I'll give you some examples in a few minutes. So one of the things you do when you do this architectural audit is you identify either unsold or maybe even undervalued, underpriced old assets. Then you design new assets from existing assets And then you design new assets from new assets. Let me give you 3 examples. I'm a big believer in what I call theme park architecture. I think Disney's got it right. And when I look at a property, I try to look at it through a Disney-esque kind of perspective. So how do you build theme park-like architecture? Several years ago, I was the event architect on a new music festival in Charleston called Jazz Fest. We modeled it after the historic New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, which most people call Jazz Fest. In this case, it was the Charleston Music and Heritage Festival, or Jazz Fest. And so we created all kinds of theme park elements, 4 stages with different genres of music, attracting different audiences, a culinary area, a kids area, a retail area, themed foods, all sorts of stuff. I'm very, very proud of the architecture of that event. We're working with Charleston Southern, small private Baptist university here in Charleston. They are the Buccaneers. And I went to their AD and I said, I got an idea. Why don't you turn your stadium into a pirate ship? And we'll just have a football game breakout in the pirate ship. And he liked it. And that's what we've done. We've created Treasure Island for kids. We've created the Wharf for alumni. We've created a place called the Crow's Nest for visiting dignitaries. We've created a beach for the students. And oh, by the way, a football game breaks out in that. So we've got themed areas there. And then I mentioned my client, the Grand Ole Opry, earlier. The Opry, we're able to kind of create, elements within elements. You've got the show itself in the auditorium, but we also have a large plaza out front to do a pre-event plaza party. We have backstage where you can interface with the artists and sit and have some lemonade and some popcorn. We've also got the ability to sit on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry and watch the show from behind the artist. So we've got different architecture for everything that we've got. We've done a lot of work historically with the Atlantic Coast Conference. I'm a big ACC fan myself. And so we've created some swim lanes and platforms for the ACC and the new ACC network. Here are the 6 that we're working with. Number 1 is innovation. The ACC has been a very innovative conference. One of the first conferences to have a basketball tournament. First conference to have a shot clock. First conference to have a 3-point line. A lot of innovations in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Access. We want to have more access to our student athletes and to our coaches by our fans. Academics. We've got more private schools in the ACC than any other Power 5. We're very proud of our academics, and we want to stress our academics and our academic success in the ACC. Leadership. How do we stress the fact that we want to be a leader in tomorrow's world? Health, fitness, and wellness. We want to be the healthiest conference. We want to make sure our student athletes have the best service and our fans and our students are healthy. And finally, how do we put the coast back in the Atlantic Coast Conference? How do we do something with fishing and boating and cruise ships and seafood and those types of things going forward? Now, here's what I do know about all consumers. They will economize on the basics. There's no stigma in taking your Lexus and your Louis Vuitton bag and going into Dollar General to buy a bag of ice. But I know 2 things about consumers. Beyond economizing on the basics, they will spend for the authentic and they will splurge for the exceptional. You want to live, if you're an event, at the intersection of the authentic and the exceptional. Because if you don't, you become a commodity. And nobody wants to be a commodity today. So now here's your assignment from episode 3. I want you to do a complete architectural audit of something that you are currently trying to sell. Take a blank sheet of paper, sit down, and list everything available in that property, including things that you've already sold or are already sponsored, but things that are not yet sponsored, and then make a list of things that you could create based on what you think fans want to have. That's your assignment from episode 3. We'll be back soon with episode 4 to discuss step 4, which is fit, and step 5 on engineering.